Nobody hit you. Nobody screamed at you. Your parents kept a roof over your head, food on the table, and by most definitions, you had a normal childhood. So why does deep connection feel so hard? Why do you sometimes feel like you don't really know how to identify what you feel inside? Why do you instinctively put everyone else's needs before your own without even thinking about it? If those questions feel familiar, stay with me. Because what I am about to describe might finally put a name to something you have been carrying for a very long time without knowing what it was. And once you have that name, everything starts to make a little more sense. Childhood emotional neglect is not about what happened to you. It is about what did not happen. It is the emotions that were never acknowledged. The feelings that were dismissed or minimized or simply never responded to. The moments when you were hurting or scared or confused, and needed someone to see that, and no one came. And because it is invisible, because there are no dramatic events to point to, no obvious wounds, most people who experienced it spend decades not knowing it happened at all. They think they are simply not emotional people. They think they are fine. They think other people had it worse, so they have no right to feel the way they feel. But here is what I want you to understand from the very beginning of this video. The absence of something can be just as damaging as the presence of something harmful. You do not need to have experienced obvious trauma for your emotional world to have been affected. Emotional neglect is real. Its effects are real. And naming it today is one of the most important things you can do for yourself. Sign 1. You struggle to identify your own emotions. Someone asks how you feel and you genuinely do not know. Not because you are not feeling anything, but because nobody ever taught you to pay attention to what was happening inside you. Emotions were not discussed in your home. They were not named, validated, or explored. So you never developed the internal vocabulary for your own emotional experience. This is called alexithymia in psychology, difficulty identifying and describing feelings. And it is one of the most common signs of emotional neglect. The practical effect is that you often know something is wrong without being able to say what. You feel disconnected from your own interior world. And other people's emotions can feel much easier to identify than your own. Imagine going through your whole life speaking a language fluently, but never being taught to read or write it. That is what it feels like to have emotions but no vocabulary for them. You experience them but you cannot access them clearly. And that gap between feeling and naming creates a very particular kind of inner loneliness. What to do? Once a day ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Do not accept fine or okay as an answer. Sit with the question. Even just saying I feel tense or I feel flat today is real progress. The more you practice naming it, the more access you get to your own emotional world. Sign 2. You feel like a burden when you have needs. Asking for help feels deeply uncomfortable. Needing things from other people brings guilt, sometimes even shame. You would rather figure everything out alone than ask someone for support, because somewhere along the way you learned that your needs were inconvenient, too much, or simply not important enough to bother anyone with. This belief follows you into every relationship you have as an adult. Into friendships where you give everything but struggle to receive. Into romantic relationships where you minimize what you need to keep the peace. Into work situations where you suffer in silence rather than speak up. Think about the last time someone offered to help you and you said no thank you even though you really needed it. Think about the last time you were struggling and chose to say I am fine rather than tell the truth. That is this pattern in action. And it is exhausting. Because carrying everything alone, when you do not have to, takes an enormous amount of energy that could be going somewhere else. The truth is, having needs does not make you a burden. It makes you human. Every person on earth has needs. The difference is that yours were treated as optional when you were too young to know that was wrong. Sign 3. You are exceptionally good at reading other people but not yourself. You can walk into a room and immediately sense the mood. You know when someone is upset before they say a word. You tune into other people's emotional states with remarkable precision. But your own emotions go largely unnoticed, even by you. This is because you spent your childhood paying very close attention to the adults around you. Monitoring their moods. Anticipating their needs. reading the room so you could adjust yourself accordingly and stay safe. It became your superpower. And it became your blind spot. Because while you were busy tracking everyone else, nobody was tracking you. And you never learned to track yourself. So now you move through the world as an expert in other people's inner lives, and a stranger to your own. Sign 4. Your inner critic is unusually harsh. When children's emotional needs go unmet, they rarely conclude that the adults in their lives failed them. They are not developmentally capable of that conclusion. Instead they conclude, something must be wrong with me. Why else would my feelings not matter? Why else would no one come? That conclusion becomes the foundation of a very persistent inner voice. One that follows you into adulthood telling you that you are too much, not enough, unworthy of the things you want, lucky that anyone puts up with you at all. That voice is not the truth. It is not wisdom. It is not discernment. It is a wound that learned to speak. And every time you believe it, every time you treat it as fact rather than as an old injury, you are giving it power it was never supposed to have. Learning to separate yourself from that voice is one of the most transformative things you can do. Not to silence it, because fighting it gives it more power. But to hear it and say, I know where you came from. And I do not have to believe you anymore. Sign 5. You feel a low-grade emptiness sometimes that is hard to explain. Not sadness exactly. Not depression necessarily. Just a quiet hollowness. A sense that something is missing that you cannot quite name. Like there is a room inside you that has always been slightly unfurnished. You can function. You can laugh. You can have good days. But underneath all of it there is this faint hum of something absent. This emptiness is the emotional equivalent of a nutrient deficiency. Your system is missing something it needed during its most formative period and it has never stopped noticing. It is not a personality trait. It is not just who you are. It is a signal. And signals can be responded to. Here is what I want you to understand about all 5 of these signs. They are not character flaws. They are not evidence that something is fundamentally broken in you. They are adaptations. Your mind and body did exactly what they were supposed to do. They adapted to the environment they were placed in. If your emotional world was not seen or responded to, you learned to function without that foundation. And you have been functioning without it ever since. But functioning is not the same as thriving. And recognizing these signs today is the first step toward building what was missing, not from the outside, but from within yourself. Learning to name your emotions. Learning to take your own needs seriously. Learning to speak to yourself with the kindness that was absent when you needed it most. This is the work. It is slow. It is non-linear. And it is absolutely possible at any age from any starting point. If you grew up in a home where emotions were not discussed, where you were told to toughen up, stop crying, or that you were too sensitive, I want you to know something. Those messages were wrong. Not because the people who said them were evil, but because they were likely carrying their own unmet emotional needs and simply passed on what they were given. Understanding that does not excuse the impact. But it can begin to release the weight of it. You were not too much. You were not too sensitive. You were a child who needed to be seen. You deserved that. And it is never too late to give yourself what you needed back then. If you recognize yourself in any of those signs today, I want to say something to you directly. This was not your fault. You were a child. You adapted to what you were given. And the fact that you are here right now, listening, asking questions about yourself, trying to understand your own story, that is already healing. That is already courage. Most people never get this far. The most important first step is exactly what you did today, naming it. You cannot heal what you have not identified. And today you identified it. That matters more than you know. Tomorrow we are going to talk about one of the most practical things you can work on immediately, how to say no without drowning in guilt. Subscribe so you do not miss it. And please leave a comment below. Did any of these 5 signs resonate with you? Even just a yes in the comments tells me this reached the right person. Take extraordinary care of yourself tonight. I will see you tomorrow.